Hey everyone, welcome back to Sip and Talk.
You know, health stuff. It's always top of mind for our listeners, right?
Totally. That's exactly why today we're doing a deep dive into something you can't really see but is, well, pretty much everywhere, microplastics.
Yeah, we've been looking at the research trying to answer those big questions like, where are they even coming from?
And what are they actually doing to us? You know, our health.
Right. And maybe most importantly, what can we realistically do to, avoid them?
So think of this as getting the essential lowdown on this invisible but really important issue. All right, so let's get right into it. When we talk about microplastics, what exactly are we talking about, size-wise, for instance?
Okay, so basically, we're talking about plastic pieces that are smaller than 5 millimeters.
5 millimeters. Okay,
yeah.
Like a sesame seed. Is that about right?
Yeah, roughly. That's sort of the upper size limit, but they go way, way smaller than that, down to 0.0001 millimeters.
Whoa.
And then get this, there are also nanoplastics. Oh. Even tinier. We're talking under 0.0001 millimeters. So yeah, seriously microscopic stuff.
Tiny plastic ninjas. Okay. So these little terrors, they don't just poof into existence, right? Where do they actually start?
Right. Good question. Generally, we break them down into two main kinds. First up, you've got primary microplastics.
Primary.
Yeah, these are plastics that are actually manufactured to be that small. Think microbeads, like the ones they used to put in face scrubs or toothpaste.
Oh, right. Those little scrubby things. Yeah, thankfully some of those are getting banned now.
Exactly. Or they might be used in, certain industrial processes as tiny pellets or powders.
Okay, so made small on purpose. What's the other kind, then?
That would be secondary microplastics. And these are the ones that form when larger plastic items break down over time.
Ah, so like plastic bags, bottles, things like that.
Precisely. Bags, bottles, fishing nets, even your car tires shedding bits as you drive. Sun, wind, water, friction, all that stuff just breaks the bigger plastic down into these tiny fragments.
Okay, so big plastic breaks down into little plastic. Makes a depressing kind of sense. Now, where are these things actually showing up in our daily lives? Like the usual suspects?
Yeah, some of the big ones are probably what you're already thinking. Synthetic clothing, for example.
Like my fleece jacket.
Exactly. Polyester, nylon. They shed tiny fibers, microfibers, every single time you wash them. It's a huge source.
Wow. Okay, what else?
Tire wear is another massive one. Just driving around, the friction on the road releases loads of these particles.
Huh. Never really thought about tires that way.
Yeah. Then, of course, plastic containers and food packaging, especially if you, heat food up in them or use them over and over.
Right, the microwave thing.
And maybe, surprisingly, ultra-processed foods can be a source, too. Microplastics can potentially get introduced during all that processing and packaging.
Wait, so my comfy hoodie and my convenient packaged snacks might be part of the problem? Yikes. What about those microbeads? Are they completely gone?
Well, bans are in place in many areas for things like rinse-off cosmetics, but, they might still linger in some products. Always worth a quick look at the label, just in case.
Good tip. Now, I bet there are some sneakier places these things hide, too. What are the less obvious sources we might not think about?
Oh, for sure. There are definitely some surprises. Think about the paint used for road markings.
The lines on the street, seriously.
Yeah. As cars drive over them, they wear down and release microplastics. Same goes for paints used on buildings or boats weathering breaks them down.
Okay, that's wild. What else?
Urban dust is another big one. It's this whole mix of stuff, but it includes tiny bits from the soles of our shoes wearing down or artificial turf degrading.
So just walking around contributes.
In a way, yeah. Even things like manufacturing processes or recycling facilities can accidentally leak microplastics into the environment. And then there's agriculture.
Farming? How?
Well, farmers sometimes use plastic sheeting on fields. And also, something called biosolids. Basically, treated sewage sludge is sometimes used as fertilizer. And that sludge can contain all those microfibers that went down the drain from our laundry. So it's a whole cycle,
Man, it really feels like it's coming from everywhere. And all this stuff, it ends up in the water, obviously, but also the air we breathe.
Exactly. They get caught up in these natural environmental cycles and just spread everywhere.
Okay, speaking of air, I read something recently that kind of blew my mind. Microplastics are actually in the air, floating around way up high. Is that real?
It is, yeah. It's a field of research that's really growing, and the findings are pretty eye-opening. These tiny plastic bits are constantly getting lofted up into the atmosphere.
How does plastic get airborne like that? Does it just float up?
Not quite like balloons, but think about like sea spray or sea foam. When those bubbles burst, they can eject tiny particles, including microplastics, right into the air.
Huh.
Also, tires spinning on the road kicks up dust, including plastic particles. Agricultural activities stir up dust. Even bubbles bursting from plastic degrading in the ocean can send fragments airborne.
Plastic sea spray. That's a crazy thought. And these things actually travel far.
Oh, yeah. They've found microplastics in super remote places, like high up in the Pyrenees Mountains, places you wouldn't expect.
Wow. How do they get there?
It seems like they get carried long distances by wind, and then they come down in rain and snow. Researchers were actually pretty surprised. Plastic wasn't really on their radar as a major air pollutant initially.
So they're like tiny, unwanted globetrotters.
Pretty much. They're so light they can travel thousands of miles. And this is where it gets a bit personal. We are definitely breathing them in.
Oh, great.
Yeah, studies have actually found microplastics lodged in human lung tissue.
Seriously? In our lungs? That's unsettling. So we're just breathing plastic dust constantly.
Well, any single particle might only stay airborne for, hours or maybe weeks. But the issue is the constant input from all these sources. It means they're pretty much always present in the air around us.
Okay, and I also saw something about clouds, them affecting clouds. It sounds like sci-fi.
It does sound a bit wild, yeah. But there's this idea that microplastics can act as what they call cloud condensation nuclei, basically seeds for clouds.
Seeds for clouds.
Yeah, you know how clouds form when water vapor condenses onto tiny particles, usually dust or salt or soot?
Uh-huh.
Well, it turns out some microplastics might be able to do that too. They can act as surfaces for water or ice to condense onto.
So plastic clouds, could that actually change the weather?
That's the big question. Early lab tests suggest some types of microplastics might actually be quite effective at seeding clouds, maybe even as good as natural stuff like mineral dust. And if you start changing how clouds form their pipe, how high they are, how long they last, that could potentially impact things like temperature, rainfall, maybe even the bigger climate picture.
Wow, so our plastic trash could literally be messing with the weather systems. Is it making things warmer or cooler?
That's the multi-million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, we don't know for sure yet. It could potentially lead to warming or cooling, depending on the specifics.
Yeah.
We really need a lot more research on how much plastic is actually up there and what it's doing.
Okay, this is getting more concerning as we go. So we're breathing them, probably eating them.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening inside us? I saw a headline about microplastics ending up in the brain. Is that right?
Yes, that finding has definitely caused a lot of understandable alarm. So the main ways we get exposed are, ingestion, eating and drinking contaminated stuff,
right.
Inhalation, breathing them in from the air, and even some dermal contact, like through cosmetics. But yeah, the idea that these particles might actually build up in the brain is particularly worrying.
Yeah, tell me more about that study. What did they find?
Okay, so there was a 2025 study published in Nature Medicine, I believe, and it reported a pretty sharp increase, like around 50%, in the concentration of microplastics found in human brain samples between 2016 and 2024.
50% increase in just, 8 years? That's fast.
It really is. And here's the other key finding. They found significantly higher concentrations, like 3 to 10 times higher in the brains of people who had dementia compared to those who didn't.
3 to 10 times. Wow, that's a huge difference. So are we saying microplastics cause dementia?
Okay, this is really important. The study shows a strong association, a link, but it doesn't definitively prove that the microplastics caused the dementia.
Gotcha. Correlation, not necessarily causation.
Exactly. But finding that much more plastic in the brains of people with dementia, it absolutely raises serious concerns. It makes you strongly suspect microplastics could be playing a role, maybe worsening the condition or contributing to its development.
Okay, so how could they even affect the brain? What are the possible ways?
Well, there are a few potential mechanisms researchers are looking at. One idea is that some of these particles, especially the really tiny nanoplastics, might be small enough to actually cross the blood-brain barrier.
That protective shield around the brain.
Yeah, that one. And once inside, what do? Well, animal studies, particularly using polystyrene particles, have shown they can trigger inflammation in the brain and even cause damage to brain cells.
Inflammation and cell damage?
Yeah.
That sounds really bad. Are there other health risks we should be aware of besides the brain stuff?
Unfortunately, yes. When we inhale them, there's evidence suggesting they might suppress the immune system in our lungs. That could make us more susceptible to infections.
Okay.
They've also been found inside our arteries. And some studies have linked their presence there to a higher risk of cardiovascular events, like stroke and heart attack.
In our arteries.
Yeah. And then there's the whole chemical side of it. Plastics aren't just plastic. They often contain added chemicals, right?
Like BPA and stuff.
Exactly. BPA phthalates, chemicals that are known endocrine disruptors. That means they can potentially mess with our hormones, affecting metabolism, reproductive health, all sorts of things.
Okay, wow. It's a lot to take in. Feels a bit overwhelming, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
But thinking about us, regular people, what can we actually do to try and cut down our exposure? Is there anything practical?
That's the crucial question, right? And yes, absolutely. Based on where these things come from, there are definitely steps you can take. Probably the single biggest impact comes from cutting back on single-use plastics.
Okay, like water bottles and bags.
Exactly. Switch to reusable water bottles, glass or stainless steel are great choices. Bring your own reusable bags to the store. Try to consciously choose products with less plastic packaging whenever possible.
Makes sense. What else?
Think about your clothes. Opting for natural fibers, cotton, linen, hemp, wool over synthetics like polyester and nylon helps reduce microfiber shedding when you wash them.
So ditch the fleas sometimes.
Or if you do have synthetic clothes, consider using things like special laundry bags or filters that are designed to capture those microfibers during the wash cycle.
Laundry bags. Okay, I've seen those.
Yeah.
What about personal care stuff?
Yeah, check the labels on cosmetics, toothpaste, scrubs. Look out for ingredients like polyethylene or polypropylene. Those can indicate plastic microbeads. Choose alternatives without them.
Right, avoid the plastic scrubbies.
And filtering your drinking water is another good step. Using a high-quality water filter, maybe one specifically certified to remove microplastics, can definitely help reduce what you ingest.
Okay, filter water, avoid microbeads. What about the air? That seems harder to control outside.
It is trickier, yeah. But you can take steps to improve your indoor air quality. Simple things like opening windows regularly for ventilation.
Okay.
Using air purifiers equipped with HEPA filters can trap a lot of airborne dust, which often contains microplastics. Same goes for vacuum cleaners. Using one with a HEPA filter helps capture more of those tiny particles from carpets and floors.
HEPA filters, got it. What about food? You mentioned processed foods earlier.
Right. Try to reduce how much ultra-processed food you eat, as that tends to involve more processing and packaging steps where contamination might happen. Choose fresh, unpackaged options when you can. And be aware that seafood, unfortunately, can accumulate microplastics from the ocean.
So maybe less packaged stuff, more fresh produce. Anything else on the food front?
Yes. Big one. Try really hard not to heat food in plastic containers, especially in the microwave. Transfer it to glass or ceramic first.
Okay, no microwaving plastic. Good rule.
And finally, just a basic hygiene thing. Wash your hands regularly, especially before you eat. Helps wash off any dust or particles you might have picked up from services.
It's good to know there are things we can do individually. It gives back a bit of control. But what about the bigger picture? Are governments or, larger organizations doing anything?
Yes, there is some movement on that front, which is positive. For example, the European Union implemented a ban on intentionally added microplastics in certain products starting back in October 2023.
Oh, really? What kind of products?
Things like rinse-off cosmetics, detergents, fertilizers, even the infill used on artificial sports fields. They set specific limits and definitions based on size and composition. So it's a start.
That's good, a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
But it still sounds like completely avoiding them is probably impossible right now.
Honestly, yeah, given how widespread they are in the environment, completely avoiding exposure is incredibly challenging, probably impossible. And it's really important to remember, the science is still evolving here. Researchers are actively working to understand the full long-term health effects and exactly how these plastics impact our bodies. It's very much ongoing research.
Okay, let's just take a moment and quickly recap the main takeaways from this deep dive. It was a lot.
Right. So point one, microplastics are basically everywhere. Air, water, food, soil, everyday products.
Point two, we're definitely taking them in, breathing them, eating them, drinking them.
And point three, there's growing evidence they can accumulate in our bodies, even crossing protective barriers to get into places like the brain.
Which leads to point four, the potential health concerns. That link with dementia, while not proven causation, is alarming. Plus, risks to lungs, heart, maybe hormones.
Exactly. Serious potential risks that need more investigation. But the final point, point five, is that we're not totally helpless.
Right. There are practical steps you can take, like reducing single-use plastic, choosing natural fibers, filtering water, improving indoor air, being mindful about food prep.
All those things can help lower your personal exposure.
So we have some agency.
We do. And maybe zooming out one last time, and it really makes you think, doesn't it? With plastic production still rising and these particles lasting so long, what are the truly long-term consequences of this invisible pollution for us and for the planet? And what kind of collective action is really needed to tackle it? It's definitely some serious food for thought.
Absolutely. Heavy stuff, but important. Well, that is about all the time we have for this deep dive today. If you found this eye-opening, maybe a little bit concerning, make sure you subscribe to the Sip and Talk podcast. You don't want to miss what we dig into next.
Yeah, definitely subscribe.
Oh, and hey, while you're clicking things, go check out our old friend Micky's YouTube channel, too. Seriously, go see what that guy's up to. You'll regret it. Probably.
Until next time, everyone, keep asking questions, keep digging deep, and stay curious.